big news coming out of Chelmsford this week with a bit more detail on the departure of CEO John Stephenson. This had already been announced, but now we have detail that he is seeing his role through to the end of the season and then departing for warmer climes. He's going to be the CEO of Western Australia Cricket. Joining me to talk about this is my old friend, Richard Clarke. Richard, what do you think?
Well, it squares the circle, shall we say, because we didn't really know what was going on with regard to his departure, given that it was couched under the sort of blanket term of reorganisation by Essex County Cricket Club. There were stories coming out when it was announced he was leaving over the club not being able to afford him. It makes a little bit more sense now. Presumably, this has been in the works for some period of time. It always is for major jobs, especially when they're overseas. But it's an upward move for John Stephenson, and he deserves it. He merits it. He's done an excellent job at Essex County Cricket Club, seen us through some very difficult times with a lot of skill, and he's always been approachable, always made himself available, and I think he leaves with a lot of good wishes from a lot of fans, and good luck to him. You have to say that any county cricket club outside those hosting test matches are in a precarious position, and I'm sure he's got bills to pay like the rest of us. And why not go and work for Western Australia, given that there'll be more job security there in a sunnier clime? Good luck to John Stephenson is all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth highlighting when he was brought in to do the role. I mean, he had a lot on his plate, to say the least, with the Newton report just sort of getting underway, all other stuff, all the other accusations, the financial peril, and of course the ground redevelopment situation. I think you're right. I think he has handled this, and he's shown really adept skill, which has obviously been picked up by Western Australia. Um, do you think that this was appreciated enough by people sort of inside and beyond Essex?
No, I don't think it was at all. I think what he's done is turn Essex from, and I don't think we're in a necessarily a bad position under um the, for want of a better phrase, the previous regime at the club. But what he's done is turn us from being, well, turn us towards the future, which is the important bit. And issues over racism allegations, which led to the Newton report, that's not of John's making, but he's had to handle them. That's led to internal bickering, internal fighting that we've all seen the output from, but certainly I don't know all the ins and outs of it. However, I do think that we coasted along fine for years, but and certainly on the pitch we've been absolutely fine. Off the pitch, while we've been debt free, and that's a not inconsiderable achievement at all, in light of the situation around some other counties. The ground has not moved forward at all, and that is a major millstone now. And we literally didn't fix the roof while the sun shines. That suddenly, the last few years, we've turned around and looked at Chelsea and thought, oof, we are well behind here, well behind. And ground criteria now is seen as one of the major qualities that any cricket club or cricket franchise has to have to move forward. And there's even talk about it being the deciding factor between you being top tier or second tier. So that's, while no one can predict the future, that is still a major miss by the previous people in charge of the county. And John has tried to address that while battling various things off the pitch, not of his own making. And I think he's also, this aspect of making himself available is critically important. What he goes around the ground, he's talked to people, he's shown his face, he's been available, and that really counts. And you've seen, it's like when you leave a job, right? When you leave any job, you get a load of people saying, "Oh, why are you going? Because you've been really good. You've been really good for us." Well, if you'd have told me at the time, perhaps I'd have stayed and been happier. We now appreciate John a little bit more, and he leaves a massive gap. Not that I think Dan Feast, not that I know Dan Feast at all, but he has a very good reputation, a sound pair of hands. However, we will still miss John Stephenson greatly.
Yeah, I think he brought a different level of style to the role. As you said, you know, it was very visible, very accessible to members, always there on match days, but also organising things such as members' supper evenings, which were always well attended, and with a few special guests along just to kind of put a cherry on the cake of the occasion. And in constructing the board in the way that he did, he had the very impressive Anu alongside him as chairman, Anu Mahindra, and I think Neil Faraday is good as a treasury. Collectively, they put across something that was very professional, safe hands, steady hands on the tiller. Is there a genuine worry that this is going to falter now?
Yes, there is a genuine worry in my head about where the fact it might falter, because if you look at those four that they had at the front four of the recent meetings, it was, as you said, Dan Feast, it was Anu, it was Neil Faraday, it was John Stephenson. I turned around to John and said, that's the best quartet I've seen us have.
Agree.
And yet again, it's forward looking, it's looking to move us onto a different plateau. And the reason why it might falter is there's a vacuum. As good as Dan Feast's reputation is, and yet again, I don't know him, but he's very, very good reputation, and did a lot certainly during COVID times. But you're still going to miss John Stephenson, and also there's challenges over county cricket at the moment. Any cricket club outside of those franchise hosts and test hosts, which are virtually the same thing, or certainly if the 8 franchises turn into 10, that might sort of bridge that gap that I'm talking about there. But if there's 8 clubs or 10 clubs that have a secure future, that leaves 8 that don't. And Essex are one of those 8. So this is exactly the wrong time to have this sort of thing happen. And John did a very good job of bringing people together. And you sense that there was a collaborativeness between that quartet at the top. They worked together and they were greater than the sum of their parts, and the sum of their parts was quite good, pretty good. So there's all sorts of worries here, all sorts of worries about where we end up here, because they were just announcing something very forward looking with regard to the ground.
Yeah,
which is it's a tight time scale. It's going to take a lot of money. We don't know where all the money's coming from yet, but they've communicated yet again ahead of time, shown us a plan, given us provisos, not been stupidly optimistic, but realistic, and saying, look, here's our plan for the way forward. We're not going to be selling out to make this happen. That's what they've told us. Okay, I can get right on board with that. And now a major component of that has gone. So yes, worrying times.
Yeah, I think anyone taking over, or certainly the current incumbents on the board, really do need to grasp the nettle with this. And I think probably a good thing to do to try and reassure members and supporters is to give a bit more detail on this plan, where they are. Because, I mean, it was a good plan, Project 2030, with good ambitions of becoming a centre for women's cricket, and expanding and developing the ground in the right manner, with the areas which were screaming out to be knocked down and rebuilt, i.e. the pavilion and some of the hospitalities and the players' facilities. What they need to do, in my opinion, is really make a big noise about the progression with that now, because, as you say, it's a very, very tight timeline, and lots of work has got to be done. If they do go ahead, lots of work has got to be done over the close seasons, and I would suggest starting at the end of this close season, they need to be doing something or showing some progress of this project. Because if they don't, it's just going to slip like it did 15 years ago. They were talking about ground redevelopment and nothing happened.
We've had plans like this a number of times. We talked about developing that River End, where there's a set of flats that went up that had nothing to do with the club as far as I could see it. And then there was talk about the Olympic Stadium. That didn't happen. And I know these things are hard, and I know these things are difficult, and it's not so easy. But at the same time, I'm looking at clubs like Leicestershire have got a grand plan about what they're trying to do, and Gloucester are moving to the are moving now. I'm not sure they particularly want to move, and you know, it's with a certain amount of reluctance, but they're doing it to create a future for themselves. And then there's Hampshire, who have, you know, Northlands Road was a ground akin to Chelmsford, and now they have something big and shining that will be hosting an Ashes Test. Yes, you could argue it's a soulless out of town stadium, but it does set Hampshire up for the future in a way that that Essex have not been set up for the future. And that's the key thing that John Stephenson's done: turn us around and point us towards the future. And that's a hard thing. And I would say to any county cricket club, but especially Essex, I didn't like the griping, the sniping that John had against him, because I felt that there was too much vested interest behind that, and county cricket isn't strong enough to be divided, not only within a particular county club or between the county clubs themselves, especially that lower 8 that I've spoken about before. We need to be united, and we need to fight together. I don't agree with everything John did, and as I say, not all the previous regime was bad at all. They did some good things. We need to accept the things we don't agree with and move forward together, because county cricket as a whole is not strong enough to survive unless we do that.
No, that's absolutely right. You know, we do need the lesser counties, if you like, need to band together to ensure their survival. If we take the news just at face value, that he's been offered a better job, more lucrative, you know, at a test ground in Australia, I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, God, if that was offered my way and your way as well, I suppose we both jump at it and get on a Qantas plane straight away.
Yeah, we don't know if it's more lucrative, no, but on the face of it, it does seem more lucrative. The interesting thing here, Darren, is the market tells you something, okay? And John Stephenson was a CEO at a county club, and he's moved abroad to a major venue, a major organization in the same sport in a major country. That tells me he had ability. That tells me that he had such ability that someone else wanted him. Now, what other CEOs have done that? What other county CEOs have done that? Yeah, some have moved to different places, to different counties, for example.
Different
We've had
sports.
some people come from football into cricket. But the market normally decides. So for all those critics of John Stephenson, I would turn around and say, well, he's got another job, a good one, arguably a better one.
Yeah.
And that tells you something.
So do we then deduce, following the logic, that he's gone off because he's been offered a better opportunity, and that the sort of touted narrative at the time was that the club couldn't afford to pay him? If we now assume on face value that the money is there, it wasn't about budget at all, do they now need to quickly set about getting someone that is going to assume that role under a similar package?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of supposition in the question there. So, I mean, my assumption was that the reorganization that they talked about in the statement and the immediate appointment of Dan Feast into general managership would suggest that they're done there. That Dan is going to be now the not the CEO, but he is going to be the chief executive, separate in small letters, and the major executive of the club running the show. That was my assumption, but we don't know the answer to that. Yet again, I would argue that the statement was a little bit opaque, a little bit hard to read, and I would like clarification at the next members meeting to understand, look, what's gone on. I mean, what I loved about the members meetings that we've had recently is that they've treated us like adults. Turned around and said, look, this is what we're thinking about. Please don't share this on social media. We don't want people to run away with this, but this is what we're thinking. So, you know, I tweet every day, right? I haven't shared it because they asked me not to.
Yeah.
And I want to be treated like an adult. And that's the quid pro quo, right? I want Essex to do well. And I want these ideas to come to fruition. And I want them to talk to me about them and listen to what I've got to say as a member of the club. So treating me like an adult works. So yeah, I would like that. I would like a little bit more honesty within the statement, if honesty is the right word, but you know, clarity, I suppose.
Yeah, I get. You know, my feeling with this, and we talk about the restructure, and Dan Feast, who's been a fantastic servant of the club, and he's, you know, he works so hard, but it just feels to me a little bit like Gordon Brown taking over from Tony Blair. To be in a major central front of house role, you need to have a certain personality and a certain presence, which John definitely had. I think it's asking a lot of Dan to assume that, unless we're going in a completely different direction. But I would suggest that with all the challenges that we all know about facing county cricket, you need someone that's going to be quite happy to stand in the spotlight.
Well, yeah, again, I've got to say, I don't know all the facts here. I don't know Dan Feast at all. He was deputy CEO, of course. He was recently appointed deputy CEO. So moving him from there to general managership might mean they are going to appoint a CEO, because if not, why have you not moved up the deputy into the main role? Of course, general managership is more organizational. CEO has got a wider strategic brief, and also I feel a little bit more commercial. You know, I had a lot of conversations with John about sponsorship and the commercial side of the club, which is hugely significant. You know, we've got to pay the bills, we've got to keep the lights on, and that may be an issue in the years to come, given the reduction in money that's coming from the ECB, being squeezed out by other issues in the game and rising costs. So we've got to raise commercial revenue. We have to get Essex as a club attractive to potential sponsors and potential broadcasts as well. And that will be a wider job, of course. But you know, we've got to make people feel invested in this club, so there can be investment in this club, because that's how we're going to grow. And that's the way that I would pitch the difference between the GM role and the CEO role, that it's got more of that commercial and strategic element to it, whereas general manager is a bit hands-on. We'll see how it works out. I'm hoping there'll be more clarity at the next members meeting.
Well, you and I and everyone else will watch closely, but so we'll thank John for all he's done in the nearly 3 years, and a fairly turbulent 3 years. I mean, lots to deal with, and I guess the way that he's handled it has put a spotlight on him, which has obviously been picked up. So we wish him well at Western Australia, and we'll see what happens next. Let's hope the club keeps informed.